Dale had been doing a lot of reading on Hellenic myth, so when he said he had a surprise for us at his pumpkin jamboree, we knew he wasn't screwing around. The jamboree, a weekend he organizes on his property to bring the town together and to raise a little money for the fire department, features a hayride, face painting, and a cakewalk that occupies the entire side yard, but his corn maze tends to be the highlight. A crew of hardcore maze runners formed a line before he had even finished setting up. I deposited my $5 in the bucket, like everyone else. Only, it isn't a maze this time, Dale said, arranging a last hay bale of hay around the pumpkins from the patch. It's a labyrinth. A general murmur rose. A woman holding a whirl of candy floss wanted to know the distinction. I'm glad you asked, Dale said. It's largely the fact that the path is unicursal, not multicursal. There's only one road, and it leads to only one place. There's no point if you can't get lost, a townie said. He had a reputation for pulling girls into hidden corners of previous corn mazes and taking advantage of their confusion. Also, Dale said, each of you has to go in alone. A pretty girl was implausibly holding the townie's hand. It's no fun alone, she shouted. The high school football coach took a knee to clutch his two boys to his chest. My kids aren't going in there by themselves. Dale held a bucket away from folks reaching to take their money back. Calm down, he said. Nobody has to go if they'd rather not. To be clear, the labyrinth is known to possess magic. Some say in the center you discover the one thing you most desire in the world. Others claim that God sits beyond the last bend. Individuals must find out for themselves. Go check out the jam contest if you're not feeling up to it. There's no way I'm going in there, a fireman called out, a little drunk. The man was a guest of honor for the weekend and held some influence over the group, which began to turn away and head for the jamboree's other attractions. The rope pull was always a favorite. Dale watched them leave, fingering a pumpkin's thick stem and surely considering his hours of lost work. He starts his mazes a few months beforehand, cutting into the young corn when it's tall but not yet sprouted, taking a pass first with the tractor and then with the riding mower to pull out the brace roots and tamp the corn down. He draws the maze plans on drafting paper and displays them afterward in his swept-out garage edition. He calls it the Hall of History, with other jamboree memorabilia, the gear shift from the original hayride truck, trotter prints from the winning pigs. We gather around to reminisce about which wrong turn we took and what was waiting for us on the other side. Knowing what he must have put into it, I thought it was a shame to stand by and see everyone go. The sun was still low in the sky, and it was lonely at home, where the TV had been broken for a week, and the tap water had begun to taste oddly of blood. I'll go first, I said. I'll do it. A few of the others halted their exodus. The pretty girl, whose name I remembered was Connie, let loose of the townie's hand. Unfazed, he ambled off to do drugs behind the house. That's the spirit, Dale said. Jim will do it. Everyone. He'll start us off. I shook my friend's hand. I know you worked hard on this maze, and I intend to take full advantage. It's a labyrinth, but thanks. That's the kind of pluck we're known for around here. Dale made a point of looking at the coach, who was still on one knee. Shamed, the man stood. All right then, I said, and made to get started, but Dale stopped me. He dug in a bag at his feet to extract a clay trivet, the type that allows a hot dish to sit on the dinner table. You'll need this, he said. The trivet was etched with strange symbols. There were men or warriors, and arrows and a shield, and something that resembled the buttock of a woman. I became keenly aware that the others were crowding around to observe the etchings. The thing was in my hands now. I don't know about all this, I said. It's the Phaistos disc, Dale said. I paid a pretty penny, so mind where you said it. It did seem to be imbued with some significance. How'd you get that? One of the women asked. He waved her off. Let's say I got lucky during a period of government oversight on the part of the Greeks. It puts a finishing touch on my project. Now, you go on, Jim. This is my life's effort distilled. Find out what it's all about. It was a few degrees cooler inside the labyrinth, which imparted a sense of magic, though in truth, it was only that I was shaded from the low sun by the corn. The soil smelled wet and new, and the path was wide and curved slightly to the right. Following its progress, I found that the bend continued for 30 feet before coming to a switchback. The stalks didn't do much to block sound from outside the labyrinth, and it was possible to hear the others discussing the merits and folly of my decision. You remember what he did on the hayride last year? Someone said. Some asshole was screwing around and let his cigarette drop, started a fire in the hay right in front of a bunch of kids. Jim there took it upon himself to jump out of the truck and run for the fence. He didn't come back, and so we put the fire out and went looking for him, and when we found, as always, the tale drew some heavy laughter at this point. That's enough, Dale said. When we found him. Oh, my God, a woman said, preemptively, though at that point the story could have easily been finished in gesture, and so the shame of the fire gained purchase once again. You could live your whole life in the smallest town and never run out of an audience for a story like that. The trivet was a good weight, conducting my hand's heat. It was further comforting to trace the etched shapes, settling a fingernail in the arc of a scythe or the buttock, which on closer inspection could just as easily have been a winding river. So simply was it carved. As I turned another switch, it became apparent that I had lost some sense of direction. The corn walls rustled, the voices faded, and the only sound was the incidental splash of the grouse pond on the far edge of Dale's property. On I walked, holding the trivet to my chest. I wasn't accustomed to carrying much of anything, and so the disc's weight was fatiguing indeed. I made a sincere promise to myself to start up again with my dumbbells in the garage. The sun had begun to set, and a cool breeze filtered through the leaves. After another switch in 20 paces, the voices returned. "You've got to hand it to him for going in there alone," a man said, the same one who had told the terrible story about me. "Maybe he has that adventuring spirit after all." The surprise I felt at this praise stopped me, and I held my breath to listen, but there was no sound until I started up walking again. "He's got balls," said Dale, a true friend. "I never knew he was so brave," a woman said. I stopped again and waited longer this time, counting out the seconds until I reached a minute, then 3 minutes, 5, hearing only silence, as if they had all of them lost interest and left. I took a step back in the direction I had come, but it felt as if I were pushing against a strong wind. The trivet was exerting a lateral pressure, as if it were magnetized to the far horizon. Still I labored against it. The force nearly tipped me on my rear, causing me to experience a devastating vision of myself emerging from the labyrinth, soaked down the back of my jeans, clocking in for another year of ridicule. And so I turned and continued into the labyrinth, at which point the conversation began again. "I'm proud to know him," I heard Connie say. It was a thrilling statement, but I knew better than to stop and try to hear more. The journey was providing an immediate reward, and though I was panting and making noise with my heavy footfalls, the conversation seemed to grow louder as I got closer to the center. The voices were the equivalent of a compass star in the dusking sky. "He has a strong heart," a man said. "I'm so proud of him," Dale said. "Actually, I find him pretty handsome," Connie added. Their voices buoyed me on, and I broke into a trot that carried me around the far side of the labyrinth, taking the turns without pause, drawing all the while by the trivet, which seemed towed on a wire. "I wish he'd come out here so I could shake his hand," someone said wistfully, but there was no way to stop. The switches were coming faster now, and the path narrowed, as if Dale hadn't figured out the proportions required. The corn's soft tassels brushed my shoulders. I didn't realize how exhausted I was until, turning the last corner, I found the center. The moon shone a straight beam into the clearing, which was about 8 feet wide, with a depression in the dirt the size of a man. The trivet was straining toward the ditch. It took my whole strength to hold it back, and my strength was failing, but I had to keep it safe. Dale had given it to me with 2 hands, looking me in the eye. With the last of my power, I turned around, positioning myself between my burden and the hole. The trivet did its work from there, pushing me back and down, into the pit that seemed to have been dug to suit me, complete with a rise in the dirt for my neck and a uniform pile just below my feet. The trivet settled in the center of my sternum. It grew cold there, and heavier than before, though I felt no desire to move from under its mass. I saw now that it was a stone like any other. I found that once I stopped struggling and held very still, barely breathing against its mass, I could hear the crowd again. They were telling stories of my heroism and bravery, of underwater rescue and diplomacy, tales I couldn't remember being a part of, though surely I must have been involved in some way, if so many recalled them so fondly. Eventually, I did try to stand, at which point I understood the trouble. "Folks," I said, quietly at first, "I think I got stuck on a root structure or something." They continued their talk, which grew even grander than before. Someone brought out a guitar and began to improvise songs about my origin story. "Born to a rancher just a little west of here, Jim raised his head and never cowered out of fear," went one line. My lungs strained to fill against the weight of the stone. "Dale," I called out, gasping, "I need help. Can you bring a crowbar?" I was being driven down into the dirt as if by a machine press. The carved glyphs bit into my chest and branded my skin. I was alone. Then I met the Minotaur.